Welcome to Behind the Investigation with Atlanta News First Investigates. I'm Chief Investigator Brendan Keefe, joined today by Investigator Andy Pierrotti. Hi, Andy.
Hi.
Tell us a little bit about your story that we're going to be looking at. We're actually going to hear two of your stories today, and they're both related, and they're both about these unmanned, sort of automated school zone cameras.
Yeah, so we're talking about our series called Taxation through Citation, and we started looking into this after getting high volumes of complaints about cameras that were essentially issuing tickets that normally police officers would be issuing. I'm Atlanta News First investigative reporter Andy Pierrotti. Tonight, an Atlanta News First investigation into a surveillance program watching Georgia drivers every day, costing taxpayers millions. It involves the widespread use of school zone speed detection cameras. While law enforcement say they're designed to save lives and protect children, we've uncovered money may be the real motivation.
This is Highway 441 and 23.
Gary Klingman takes us on a drive
Returning home from the mountains.
through a town he says scams drivers out of money.
That's the camera that got me.
He received this $100 citation in the mail December 2023 for speeding 57 miles per hour in a 45 mile per hour school zone in Tulula Falls, Georgia, northeast of Atlanta. Not from the city, but from a private company called Blue Line Solutions, the operator of the town's school zone speed detection cameras. This is the sign warning drivers the speed limit is 45, only when the lights are flashing. When the camera ticketed Gary, the lights were off.
I didn't believe it because I didn't think that I was speeding through a school zone.
Town officials told Gary the cameras ticket drivers almost all day, but you wouldn't know that unless you checked its website, showing cameras enforce the speed limit from 7 a.m. to 4 p.m. The warning lights turn off at 8 a.m. The camera ticketed Gary, a retired teacher, nearly an hour and a half later.
You got to be kidding me. Why do they do that to people? Why not be honest and enforce the law consistently instead of having to play games with everybody?
Gary isn't the only one who feels this way. Last year, the town's camera operator faced a class action lawsuit accusing it of collecting unauthorized revenue and excessive electronic processing fees. Since the state allowed cities to install the cameras about 5 years ago, the numbers have exploded. From 39 permits approved in 2019 to 290 last year. Public records uncovered by Atlanta News First Investigates reveal the cameras have generated more than $100 million in revenue. Right there.
Oh, my Lord.
We showed our findings to Clay Perkle.
Wow. That's incredible.
The South Georgia cattle farmer has beef with the cameras, too. Not because he got a ticket.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, members of the committee,
but as a member of the Georgia House of Representatives, who says he's received too many complaints like Gary's. The Republican filed a bill earlier this year to ban the cameras. It failed to pass.
It's about money. I mean, let's cut to the chase. It is about money. It is generating millions and millions of dollars for these communities every year. And it's like having your own personal ATM machine.
No other city in Georgia has collected more revenue from camera citations than the city of South Fulton. $14 million. City records show it's used the money to buy tasers, uniforms, computers, vehicle repairs, including this $350,000 armored vehicle.
I called it a tank. It looks like a tank.
Khalid Kamau is the city's mayor. He doesn't believe the cameras make school zones safer.
We don't have to debate that anymore because we can see year by year the amount of money that we're generating. So that tells me that it doesn't work.
Is this taxation through citation?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Mayor Kamau says the city plans to use some of the camera citation revenue to install speed bumps, which he believes work better.
The difference between speed bumps and traffic cameras is that one costs money and one makes money.
If you're not a fan of the cameras, why does the city have them?
We have a council manager form of government.
The buck doesn't stop with you.
The buck doesn't stop. If it did, I would void the contract. I would cancel the cameras. I would take all $14 million and use it exclusively on pedestrian safety.
If they would have a seat, if you...
Here's state lawmakers debating the legislation in 2018, ultimately granting cities the authority to install the cameras. A lobbyist and the bill's author at the time argued it was about protecting children.
We've had several deaths and major injuries in the state of Georgia already in these school zones, and if they think surveillance technology is the right thing to keep their children, their meemaws and peepaws and their mamas and daddies, and the crosswalk tenants safe, then they can install this if they deem necessary.
After the law went into effect, some police departments posted social media videos like these, emphasizing the cameras were about safety.
Today we're here to talk to you about speeding in the school zones. And so we're going to start enforcing that with cameras.
One of the camera operators produced social media videos for law enforcement agencies, with officers reading nearly identical scripts.
A study conducted by the Governor's Highway Safety Association
showed that between
2008
and 2017, there was a 35% increase in pedestrian fatalities throughout the United States.
But are the cameras making Georgia roads safer? According to the National Highway Safety Administration, pedestrian fatalities in Georgia have steadily increased since the cameras were installed, although it's not broken down by community or school zones. The number of school-aged children deaths nearly unchanged year to year, the vast majority at night when school is not in session.
We had a 5-year pilot, if you will. And it turns out it doesn't work. But if the goal really is school safety, children's safety in school zones, we would scrap it.
For that one moment, the camera just gets you.
Back in Tulula Falls, the town has collected more than $3 million from citations so far, purchasing this new Tahoe, a $24,000 drone, and the mayor wants to use the money to hire 2 more public safety employees, all for a town of about 200 people.
Why should I and all the other people who are driving through here have to pay to subsidize the town of Tulula Falls? I feel like the government is in my pocket.
An attorney representing Blue Line Solutions, the camera operator for Tulula Falls, declined to respond to the class action lawsuit. The town's mayor did not respond to our questions either. Representative Clay Perkle is not seeking re-election, but he says he knows many lawmakers who want to refile his legislation to ban the cameras.
So, Andy, one of the things that surprised me, and because this is behind the investigation, I want to talk about it, was when you went to interview the mayor of South Fulton, you thought that he was going to be defending the cameras, right?
I honestly didn't know how he was going to respond. I reached out to him and his chief of staff saying, hey, before this interview, can we have some sort of idea of where he stands on the issue, just so we're both prepared? I'm always very transparent before interviews with public officials, often sending them a very lengthy email about our findings. So when he sat down and he said that he didn't really like the cameras and he called them taxation through citation, I was pretty surprised.
So the title of the story came from the mayor's answer?
It came from actually a state lawmaker who was profiled in the first piece, State Representative Clay Perkle, who called them taxation through citation. He filed that bill that would have banned the cameras.
You know, it's interesting, again, because it's behind the investigation. A lot of times we're asked to give the questions in advance. We as a policy do not give questions in advance to anyone, but it is really smart to share the findings. There's a downside risk, obviously, because you're putting in an email that technically is subject to the Open Records Act, all of the findings of your story that, you know, another reporter could simply take your work and run with. But I guess it's a calculated risk because it's important that we don't generally pull surprises on people, even in an accountability interview.
Yeah, and as you know, this business is all about relationships. It's not that we're trying to be besties with any of these people, but we want at least to give them a chance to see our findings. oftentimes we think that these public officials have the stats in their head, and they're constantly tracking this stuff. And some of them do, some of them don't. So, but before every interview, as I'm sure you do, we at least say, here's what we've uncovered, here's what we would like to talk to you about.
Yeah, that makes sense. But then you also sometimes change the interview in the middle of the interview. I mean, because the thing that, look, I've been criticized for talking way more than I listen, but in an interview, I'm all ears. I mean, I'm sure you are too. You're listening to those answers because your next question is often directed by what the individual said, especially in what we would consider an accountability interview.
Yeah, which is why when the mayor reacted the way he did, I said, well, if you don't like the cameras, why are they here? And as you saw in the piece, he sort of just goes, well, the buck doesn't stop with me. We have a council government that has to weigh in on these things as well.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because South Fulton, it's only been a city for 7 years, right?
Yeah, that's right.
And but this mayor and this police chief haven't exactly been on the best of terms at all times, or this council. I mean, there have been sort of competing investigations into each other. So I guess there's no love lost in this story. What do we hear from next in this second piece?
Well, the next piece, we're focused on the police chief. The police chief is responding. He's defending using these cameras. We ask him about a study that he says proves that the camera system is working, and then we push back and we ask him more questions.
This is how the citations come.
George Worrell opens letter after letter.
So this was $150. This is from 2022. I just opened it.
Citations for speeding in the city of South Fulton.
If I dug through all of this, I promise you I probably could find like 15, 20 more of these. I would say I've gotten at least maybe 40.
40?
40.
The tickets aren't from South Fulton's police department, but a private company called Blue Line Solutions, based hundreds of miles away in Tennessee, which operates these speed detection cameras in the city's school zones.
And before you know it, you're caught.
Since 2019, he's paid thousands of dollars in camera citations, civil penalties which do not impact drivers' licenses or insurance. The local pastor and father of two confesses he's likely guilty of speeding for some, but not all.
I understand the balance of children's safety, but I believe we got to find like an equilibrium or a symmetry with child safety and not exploiting tax-paying citizens.
According to city records, South Fulton drivers pay $21 million in camera fines, more than any municipality in the state. The city's contract with Blue Line shows the company receives 35%. According to that math, the camera operator collected $7 million. Atlanta News First Investigates asked Blue Line about our analysis, but it did not respond.
Hey, how you doing, sir?
How's it going? Good.
Keith Meadows is the city's police chief who advocated for the cameras. He points to this traffic study that shows since the cameras were installed in 2019, the number of speeding vehicles in school zones has dropped more than 90%. While citations have decreased, the city still collects on average hundreds of thousands of dollars in citation revenue a month.
But at the end of the day, we believe that it's resulted in our school zones being a much safer place.
Who conducted the traffic study showing the dramatic drop in speeding? Blue Line Solutions. No one accuses it of altering numbers, but Blue Line is the same camera company that stands to financially benefit by continuing to operate in this city.
Is that appropriate? Should the city be doing its own traffic study?
I don't have an issue with the city doing our own study, but at the end of the day, LiDAR has been determined to be the most effective technology that exists when it comes to speeding.
Technology that isn't foolproof, like the city of Jonesboro, which works with RedSpeed, another camera operator. It refunded drivers $76,000 after the camera issued tickets for the wrong speed limit. Barrow County officials refunded drivers $721,000 after posting a school zone speed limit sign in the wrong location. And Blue Line Solutions now faces a class action lawsuit alleging it collects unauthorized revenue and excessive processing fees. Blue Line filed a motion to dismiss the lawsuit, claiming the litigation should be focused on municipalities that employ it to enforce traffic laws.
It's a cash cow.
State Representative Dewey McClain supports banning the cameras or reforming the 2018 law that gives cities the authority to use the cameras.
So we as legislators got to do a better job. We need to regulate this to say exactly when and why and how.
When lawmakers approved the legislation, McCain says it was pitched to protect children. According to the National Highway Safety Administration, pedestrian fatalities in Georgia have steadily increased since the cameras were installed. The number of school-aged children deaths nearly unchanged. Since lawmakers approved the cameras, Atlanta News First Investigates uncovered Georgia municipalities have collected more than $112 million in revenue from the cameras.
Yes, I voted for it.
Hook, line, and sinker.
Hook, line, and sinker. Now, 5 years later, after I look at the data and statistics and things of that nature, I wonder.
I've heard some state legislators talk about getting rid of the school cameras. Well, what's the alternative?
Hiring police officers and
16 police officers in every school zones. Then the narrative is going to be they're running speed traps in South Fulton.
Well, they're already saying that now with the cameras.
Right.
All 3 of my vehicles have been affected by these speed trap citations.
Private industry enforcing the law on behalf of police, some believe is too heavy-handed.
Now we're at a point now the people, the citizens, are like, okay, this is enough.
You know, Brendan, after the first story aired in our series, the governor did respond by saying he knows about the criticism about these cameras, basically saying this is a local issue, and if the local officials, if the constituents there have an issue with it, to get engaged with their state lawmakers.
You know, this reminds me of sort of the law of unintended consequences. You have lawmakers, including, and I love the way you did this in the first story, where you sort of set him up. Here's this beef farmer who has a beef with the law, and it turns out
Lots of pun opportunities.
Well, but it was also very creative. But then we find out that he isn't just a farmer and a citizen. He was involved in crafting the legislation, or at least passing it, and now wants it sort of rescinded. And, you know, that's really interesting because, you know, be careful what you wish for. And in this case, does it come down to a perverse incentive that, you know, whenever you talk about money, you know, it tends to have an incentive effect. And when you start pumping money through a for-profit company into a municipality or even a school district, that's going to affect the decision-making process, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's when campaign funds start getting into the conversation. We looked at campaign funds to state lawmakers from 2 major camera companies, Red Speed and Blue Line Solutions, and combined, they have donated about $300,000 to state lawmakers. So they're getting engaged. And in fact, I received a text message from a former chief of staff for a governor who's now a lobbyist for one of these companies saying, hey, I see that this story is on your radar. So they are definitely engaged, and they've hired some pretty powerful people to make sure that the cameras stay in place.
Did they have any PR people engage with you directly?
No,
unsolicited?
I've reached out to both camera companies a couple different times, and I've received no response.
I see. So perhaps strategically, we don't know because they're not responding. They've chosen that no comment is better than anything you might ask them, and they have to answer.
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. So what's the next step in terms of, you know, whether if the viewers are watching this or people are listening on our podcast and they say, hey, I want to do something about this, what can they do?
So there's 2 different things that citizens can do. They can go to their local governments that have installed these cameras in their cities, their towns, their counties, and ask them for change, ask them potentially to rescind it or reform the law or the ordinance in their city. Or they can reach out to their state lawmaker and say, hey, last session there was a bill that would have banned the cameras, and there was also another bill that would have sort of reformed the law to make them more like basically the times for all of these school zones remain the same, have some sort of continuity involved. So the best advice is get engaged with your local lawmakers, either at the city, county level, or the state.
You know, it's interesting you point out that sort of uniformity because, you know, and it comes back to the perverse incentive. The sign says one time in Tulula Falls, and then they're issuing tickets. That was your very first victim. They're issuing tickets outside of that time because you have to know on the website that it's 9 to 5, not during, you know, dismissal time or arrival time for the kids. Look, I'm a parent. I have 2 kids. I often drive my daughter to school, and, you know, I go through the school zone, and I, you know, religiously follow the school zone speed limit. Maybe because of what we do, we know that, you know, how dangerous it is if you're speeding through a school zone. With that said, though, if the light's not flashing and the time on the sign, I'm outside of that, I shouldn't be getting a ticket. And doesn't that come back to the perverse incentive? Because that's not about safety, that's about revenue.
Yeah, a lot of pushback is if the towns, cities, police departments were really, truly concerned about safety, they would make this a real criminal offense. These are civil penalties, as you know, these camera citations. They don't impact points on your license. They can impact your ability to re-register your vehicle, but the pushback that I'm hearing saying, hey, if this was really about safety, you would be having a police officer pull them over, and you'd be really hitting them hard with expensive fees that really impact their ability to drive.
Yeah, and then when you look at Tulula Falls and what they've been able to buy with that money, I mean, such a small department, and they've got some pretty extraordinary equipment, for better or for worse.
Yeah, and a lot of police departments have told me that they have issues hiring people, and this is seen as an ability to continue enforcing the law without hiring people. And it's not that they don't want to hire people. I think they're just having a difficult time getting people on the force.
Yeah, it's a force multiplier, as they call it. Andy Pierrotti, investigative reporter with Atlanta News First Investigates. Thank you so much for this series. Of course, you can always catch Andy's reporting at atlantanewsfirst.com and also on the Atlanta News First app. You can catch Behind the Investigation not only on YouTube and on Atlanta News First Plus, but also wherever you get your podcasts. Hopefully you're listening to us, but if you're watching now, you can carry our show with us in your pocket on wherever you get your podcasts. We'll see you next time.